Thank you for joining today's presentation. We're just waiting for some attendees to join, so we'll give it till 1 minute past for other people to join the call. So thank you very much. We'll start shortly.
Just quickly, we'll run through the agenda for today's webinar. So we're going to be looking at how a ransomware attack happens, cyber insurers' view on ransomware, what cyber insurance covers, and we'll also be taking a look at some real life stories of businesses who are seeking cyber insurance. And an important part will also be to look at the key requirements that insurers demand from a technology point of view. Just a bit of housekeeping as well, just to let you know, we'll be posing a few questions throughout. So you'll see a poll pop up on your screen every so often, and we appreciate your thoughts as and when we run through those.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so because we're just slightly ahead of time today. So we'll give it 30 seconds or so for some other people to join as they come in. Thank you. There's still people arriving, so we'll just wait a minute. Okay, I think we'll start there then. So thank you very much for attending our webinar presentation today with Assyrian PAM. We'll be discussing around cyber insurance and ransomware. My name is Graham Hawkey. I've been working in the privileged access management space for around 10 years now. I'm a PAM specialist at Assyrian. Hand over to James for you as well. We'll take the reins now for you. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm James Nadal. I'm a technology writer with Assyrian and a former financial services journalist. Before we start today, a little bit more information about Assyrian if you didn't know us before. So we are a cybersecurity software provider. We specialise in privileged access management. And Graham, can you tell us a little bit more about Assyrian and the types of organisations that we work with, please?
Yeah, thank you, James. Assyrian pride ourselves in being a privileged access management solution provider based in the UK. Our homegrown technologies are grown from our development department based in the UK as well. Rapid to deploy, easy to use solution. As you can see, lots of different organisations choose Assyrian for their privileged access management projects. Things like third-party access, supply chain access, internal access, having visibility of what people have access to across their estate, basically their servers and things, is what we're providing for organisations, and being able to rotate credentials and record sessions for organisations.
Thanks, Graham. And obviously today's webinar is about cyber insurance. We'd just like to point out that we don't provide insurance cover. We also don't partner with any organisation that does. The information today in this webinar doesn't constitute advice. However, we do regularly speak to and partner with organisations who have their challenges around obtaining a dedicated cyber insurance policy. So we're talking about their experiences and also knowledge that cyber insurance specialists have shared with us. So before we go on, we'd just like to pop up a quick poll for you, and we'd appreciate your responses to help inform our conversation today. So we'd just like to know, and you'll see this in a second, does your organisation currently have cyber insurance? And we'll just give you a minute to have a look at that and respond, and thank you in advance for your responses. Well, we can see, I think there's quite a fair number of the audience today does have cyber insurance, so thank you for letting us know about that. So moving on today, we will first look at how serious is the ransomware threat. So we know that ransomware is becoming extremely commonplace now, Graham, isn't it? And we've seen high profile examples. We've seen this year the BBC, BA Boots. It's one of those big stories. They were all hit by a particular ransomware attack. Graham, what's your take on how serious a threat ransomware is?
Yes, well, it's extremely serious. You know, ransomware is the #1 attack vector for organisations. 62% of all attacks, actually, from the Verizon breach report stated that they involve ransomware. So we can see that the majority of the attacks going on in the modern world are involving ransomware and the day-to-day as we see it. Also, you know, there is the attack of the supply chain, as you mentioned, with the Move It IT, I think, was the tool set. So there's that as well, which is going on. So it's kind of two sections to it. The identity, going after identity is firstly the one which we're going to go through mostly today. But there's also the attacks which take place against systems, applications, and the like of that as well.
And it's interesting to see what the cybersecurity professionals say about this. So Paul Shears, who heads up North Devon Council's IT security team, North Devon Council, a customer of ours, Paul recently told me during a case study interview that ransomware attacks are what keeps us awake at night. And incidentally, there is a full case study that you can see on our website talking about North Devon's experiences with that. I was also talking to another IT security manager recently. They're a large food production firm, another customer of Assyrian, and the IT security manager there told me that any similar organisation with such a vast production line would be left in serious trouble by such a ransomware attack. He said to me that if the ransomware attack gets into the OT network, production just stops, and it's such a big worry for any business now. So moving on, we're just going to have a look at what a typical ransomware attack looks like. So Graham, I'm just going to ask you to take everyone through this diagram here and explain a little bit more, please.
Thank you, James. And yeah, this is an attack on the identity side of things. So we're looking at humans involved here attacking, well, basically humans being attacked by organised criminals, really. So yeah, as I've mentioned earlier, 62% of the attacks that happened last year from Verizon breach report involved ransomware. 8 out of 10 of those particular attacks were from organised criminals, and 95% of those were all for financial gain. So you can see that there's a very common ground here that's happening. If we look at the front end of this, where attackers would entry point into the business, into the network, 44% of breaches involved stolen credentials last year. So stolen credentials are the biggest attack vector for ransomware attacks today. Phishing is second at about 16% of those attacks involve phishing attacks. We've all seen recently, you know, if you keep up to date your ID departments and stuff like that, there's things like QR codes being sent out now for phishing. So they're starting to move away from the links and get people to scan codes to get hold of those credentials. So the first thing really from an attacker perspective is trying to shorten the attack chain. They want to get those credentials as quick as possible, and as we can see by the statistics, they are getting hold of those and breaching organizations quickly. As a security professional, it's around elongating that attack chain to make it as long as possible and putting things like multi-factor authentication into critical systems, putting in place rotation of passwords and credentials so that humans don't see what they are or they're not declared to the end machines anymore. That's going to help you with this type of attack. And the flow of the attack generally is those stolen credentials or a phishing attack getting hold of an identity in the organization. Once they've got a foothold in that identity, they can start to spread out with that ransomware onto the network, infect files, applications. We're even seeing a lot of web applications being attacked now because they're connected to the internet. So it's a nice, easy way for an attacker to get hold of credentials, steal them, and then get a foothold in the privileged account. So once they've got a hold in there, they're looking for privileged credentials now if they haven't already got them. If they've got them, then they can access what they want with the elevation. They're allowed to with that particular credential, and they can gain footholds doing that. Or they can use the credentials that they have to gain access to other accounts. They're always looking for privileged accounts to get access to the target systems, which involve things like backups, critical systems that you need to companies need to bring themselves back after an attack. So they're looking to attack your most critical infrastructure, take you offline, and then charge you a ransom for doing so. Thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. And I know we're going to be talking more about privileged accounts as we go through our presentation today. So moving on to look at cyber insurers and their view on ransomware, we know that ransomware is one of the reasons why cyber insurance premiums have kept going up and up in recent years. And if we look at what the British Insurance Brokers Association says about this, they say that ransomware is top of mind and one of the leading sources of claims. A business is much more likely to fall victim to a ransomware or social engineering attack than their building burning down. So let's have a look now at what cyber insurance covers. So a cyber insurance policy can cover anything pretty much that happens after a breach, picking up costs that you incur. Ransomware and extortion cover is typically one key element of what a dedicated policy is likely to cover. So usually this would provide for a reimbursement of the ransom amount demanded by the attacker and also consultants' fees for overseeing that process. Some providers may also offer a ransomware readiness assessment to see if your business is prepared to protect itself and cope with an attack, and indeed recover from such an attack. So this review, it might include employee awareness, backup policies, procedures, and technical controls. And aside from that, a cyber insurance policy is also likely to cover the following: traditional financial support, first-party costs, so that could be anything related to the direct impact your business has suffered as a result of the breach, so business interruption, hardware replacement, data recovery, those kind of things. And then there's an area which could be overlooked, but actually very important: incident response. So some people might argue that managing the public relations exposure is just as critical as managing the initial event. So one thing to look out for with when you're looking at policies, whether they offer a dedicated 24/7 hotline, so that's one number to call if an attack happens. And that might also include an incident report manager or a consultant who holds your hand through the event. Access to a legal representative may be another, and then also a forensic investigation company or an IT security consultant. This package may also include a ransom negotiator and also a PR consultant, otherwise known as crisis management unit. So another very important aspect of cyber insurance, there's some very important requirements that cyber insurance providers will look for when assessing whether they provide cover to your organization. So we won't have time to go through all of these today because there is quite a long list, but we have got a very handy guide which is free to download for you. Hopefully you can see that on your panel. You can download that and get more information here, but let's have a look at some of the key ones. So multi-factor authentication, IT teams need to show insurers they have got MFA systems in place. This is really becoming a standard thing, very important. Also protecting vendor and third-party access. Graham, we're going to throw this over to you. Why is it that insurers look at third-party access, and what's the problem that they are concerned by?
Well, there's a few problems with third-party access. If you think about them being a third party in the first instance to the organisation that's using them, there can be lots of different challenges that can take place. Once you give someone that's not working, is external to your organisation, you're losing track of that identity. That is then using a password potentially that you may not know or have control over to your own systems anymore. Again, as I mentioned earlier, stolen credentials are the main attack for most breaches. So having those credentials stored and controlled within your network and then provisioned for users to single sign on to devices without having access to those is a really good place to start with third parties.
And another one is endpoint management. Graham, on this point, could you explain a bit more about what endpoints are and why that's important, please?
Yeah, lots of companies struggle with this. It's very common. Endpoint privilege management is what we call it. If you think about users need to be productive in an organization to do their job. They've got to be moving around quickly, accessing things to do things. I need to for my job, but I might need privilege with some of the things that I might be accessing with my job. So local admin rights was traditionally the way of doing things. You grant local admin rights to people, they have admin rights and they can do things on their endpoint. Problem is it makes it very insecure. So removing those rights, really good, but then it makes them unproductive. So you've got to have a Goldilocks in the middle really there, so that people can get access to the systems and applications that are required for their job, but they do not have access to local administration passwords or elevation of their account at all. Thank you.
And last but very much not least on this smaller list we have here, very important one, privileged accounts and user admin. We know from talking to cyber insurers recently that they are increasingly scrutinising these privileged accounts and user admin. It really has been cited as a key point for where the claims are coming from. And we're going to talk more. Graham's going to tell us more about privileged access shortly. So moving on to have a look at here some real life stories. So talking about kind of organisations have encountered, what they've encountered getting a cyber insurance policy. I think I mentioned North Devon Council earlier. One of our customers, spoke to them not long ago, and they were told told specifically they had to get a PAM solution in place. It was also very much the same situation for the large production firm that I mentioned earlier, that there was the sort of food industry. Their IT security manager told me a few years ago an insurance provider would only ask a handful of basic questions, but when he recently went to renew his policy, he found that they were asking around 160 questions now, and it was far stricter, especially when it came to protecting privileged accounts. As going back to those requirements we were talking about, he described it to me as a completely different ball game now, as the number one thing looking at identities being protected. So at this stage, we'd just like to ask you another question, please. So we're going to pop up another poll very shortly for you. I would just be interested to know whether, similar to North Devon and this other company I mentioned, have you had privileged access management, PAM, mandated by an insurance company? So we'll give you a little bit of time just to respond to that, and appreciate your responses. Thank you. And thank you very much for that. We can see that 33% said yes, they have had it mandated, 56% actually not sure, so quite a lot of uncertainty around that particular question, but one to bear in mind. So moving on to look at the next section. Both of the organisations that we've just been talking about, North Devon and the food production company, they came to us for help with two key solutions. That's PAM, Privileged Access Management, and EPM that Graham has already mentioned. So it's worth mentioning here to kind of sum up the importance of privileged access management. So Jonathan, who's the head of security at Howard Kennedy, a London law firm, he said that PAM is very much about protecting your crown jewels. If you don't maintain strict control over your high-level accounts, then what's the point of all your other security controls? So that leads in nicely to the next bit here, where Graham is just going to take you through in a bit more detail about privileged access management with this diagram here. Graham, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, James. And yeah, Jonathan's exactly right there. It's all around protecting those privileged credentials in the middle, the hub of the business, and then allowing people to use those accounts and privileged passwords to get access to the core critical infrastructure and having that audited. And this is exactly what we're doing here. This is a third-party access display on your screen. So on the left-hand side, we have a non-privileged user. On the right-hand side, we have a fully privileged user. They're the same person, but they're going to be using an account to allow them to elevate. So they're signing with a non-privileged account. Very similar, very common now is things like SAML, which we deploy a lot of. So you would have a mix of different types of entry points to the business for the authentication method. It's very common for that as well. Multi-factor authentication, again, key step in requirement in protecting the privileged accounts, built into Assyrium, TOTP built into our platform. So we enable all production environment users to be using multi-factor authentication. Once they've done those steps of authentication, they will then step across the virtual air gap, which gives them access to the PAM appliance, which resides within the customer's network or in their cloud. That PAM appliance is our database which stores the credentials, which are then injected to the right-hand side into the target systems which the users need access to. So the non-privileged user on the left-hand side has no indication or any access to those passwords or keys, credentials or SSH that they use to log on to the target systems anymore. And those credentials and keys are injected on behalf of the users. They're long and complex, as long and complex as the end system can handle, and they're rotated in line with policies. That means that it makes it very difficult for someone to propagate across, because they don't have access to those privileged accounts or those privileged credentials that gives them access to the target systems. So it's very much about limiting and only, limiting access to only people that need it. So third party comes in, manages one system on your estate, provision that access to them, hide the credentials, inject them, record their session, and you give them access in certain time windows. Nice, really easy, clean system to deploy, easy to use, and gives you all the requirements that you need to protect yourself against the attacks which you see today, and also it gives you the robust solution support for things like cyber insurance and also for the compliance drivers which you'll be working to, which wrap around all of this. Any questions on this afterwards, please let us know, but thanks, that gives some indication on privileged access management from the Syrian.
Great explanation, thank you for that, Graham. And at this point, we'd just like to pop one more poll on screen for you, please. So we'd just like to ask you if your organisation does currently have a privileged access management solution in place, and thank you in advance for your responses. And I can see results coming through. About half of the audience doesn't have a PAM solution in place. Only 38% do at the moment. So interesting. Thank you for your responses on that. So we're going to look now the next part at EPM, endpoint privilege management, that Graham's already touched upon a little bit. So North Devon Council, the example we talked about a little bit earlier, they also brought in EPM as part of their actions to meet the cyber insurance demand to protect those endpoints. And Graham, I know we haven't got a huge amount of time in our 20-minute webinar today to go through this in all the detail on this diagram here, but perhaps you could give us a quick walkthrough, please, of what this is all about.
Yeah, we'll go through it quickly. Yeah, EPM again is about protecting the entry points of the business. Lots of people, everyone's using laptops, desktops, machines to connect to things they need to use for their job. I do it every day. But we don't want people having access to secure passwords, privileged passwords. So with EPM, we can deploy the EPM server, which is policy based, put it into a nice, easy learning mode, which synchronizes with the users, allows the users to interact with the applications they need to for their jobs. After a couple of weeks, we've built up a baseline of automatic policies that are created. You can push those policies out to the users, push the product into hardened mode. It's now synchronizing the EPM server with the endpoint clients, allowing the policies to be pushed to those users. Those users can interact with those policies without using passwords anymore, in the standard context of a standard user still. If they need to add things to their policy, let's say I need to request access to an Adobe platform, for instance, that hasn't been captured as part of learning mode, it might be something I've not needed to access recently, I can request access to that policy as well. And that can be reviewed by IT, and they can either allow that for me and others to access that, or they can deny it and remove it for me. And lastly, I just wanted to mention temporary admin requests is something that we use for when people need access offline. So if someone's needing access on a customer's site or needs access to an application and they can't get online, they can request temporary administration access to that particular application. And that's a really nice, neat feature that we've added to the product as well. It's available in Azure as well, so EPM is also available fully deployed native Azure, so you know that as well. And thanks, that's the quick tour of that.
Thanks for that quick run through, Graham. That's great. Okay, so we're just going to now look at kind of in conclusion, we said at the beginning, is cyber insurance the answer? So I think it's quite useful to look at what the National Cyber Security Centre says. It says that cyber insurance can help your organisation get back on its feet, but will not instantly solve all of your cybersecurity issues and will not prevent a cyber breach or attack. There's clearly upsides and downsides to getting a cyber insurance policy. I guess really the obvious downside is the cost, which we've seen go up and up in recent years, and those particularly for small businesses, they may struggle with if they haven't got the kind of resources to do everything. So Graham, but on the other side, what's your take? Do you think it could prove even more costly if an organisation doesn't get insurance?
It will do eventually. If you just explain that gap appearing, that gap's going to get bigger. If you can't afford it now, you're not going to be able to afford it in 5 years. So it's a difficult one to think about. But the thing that I think is that the average cost of a breach is approaching £4 million for a ransomware attack now to recover from it, which is a lot of money, obviously, and all the downside for the business will have. But if you think about the insurance companies, their expertise, and as you mentioned earlier, they've got all the instant response stuff in place to help you recover from the attack. So you either recover from it on your own, or you're going to recover from it with someone supporting you that you're paying an organisation for an insurance purpose. So again, it's up to the customer, but insurance is there for a purpose, and it does help, especially in this scenario.
I guess a lot of it with any insurance, isn't it? It's kind of about peace of mind and knowing that it's sort of covered if the worst happens, financial losses particularly. And I guess that really probably a lot of people would say that cyber insurance is becoming a standard requirement to protect the business nowadays. Would you agree with that?
I think it will do. Not quite yet, but I think it may do. Compliance is we've seen a lot of compliance change this year. You've got things like multi-factor authentication is becoming predominantly forced now on privileged accounts, especially in some compliance drivers. This is all evolving towards that becoming more and more stringent. This is what's going on, and insurance providers are going to become more and more stringent on the requirements that you need to have to meet the policy. And again, if you fall behind with that, how do you catch up again?
Yeah, I mean, it has been mentioned as one of the downsides. We talked about it earlier, but they are becoming increasingly strict on the requirements, and as a result, harder to obtain the policy in the first place. Some people would express doubts over payouts, whether it's going to pay out in the event of an attack, of course, as well. There is that sort of angle to it. And then, with an organisation that's got very limited resources, there is that argument that could money that they've got to spend go on protection measures, so investing in software and other technology to prevent an attack instead. What do you think of that argument?
Yeah, I mean, you're fighting a losing battle with that, I think, because if you're aligning the technology but you can't afford the policy, then eventually you're going to fall behind on the technology, because you won't be, if that's going to keep going up and up and up, and those next year you're going to need more resources, more deployment, more stuff. So it's keeping up with that, and that's where we're seeing that's where what we've discussed previously is the split between organisations that can afford it and organisations like public sector that potentially can't.
And I know that another key point in terms of why cyber insurance is important is because it aids in having that effective recovery plan if the worst does happen. And it's something we touched upon earlier, that many cyber insurance policies will offer specialist support such as PR, which really can help in that situation. So there are many pros and cons, but ultimately it's up to each individual organisation of what's right for you to decide on that. So we're coming towards the end, but we do have some questions that people have sent to us, and please feel free to pop more questions into the panel on your sidebar here. Can cyber insurance prevent ransomware attacks? Well, I think we were just looking at the quote from the National Cyber Security Centre on this. It's not going to be something that prevents a ransomware attack, but it may very well help you in the event that one does happen. Another question, Graham, I'll throw this over to you. Someone's asked, can an organisation recover from a ransomware attack if they have a cyber insurance policy in place?
Yeah, I think that's the best, most robust recovery you're going to get, because you've got the organisation as an insurance company that will kick into gear and help you to feel your way through the muddy water of a ransomware attack. Without the insurance company, you're going to have to call consultants in, I expect, from a consultancy firm to help, and that's going to be expensive, I would have thought, from experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Yeah, just all that's left to say really is please do get in touch with us. Drop Graham a note if you'd like to discuss anything we've talked about today. There's also this guide we've got for you, free download, about cyber insurance, and also there's another guide about the threat to backups and protecting your backups from ransomware. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar. Really appreciate you coming along and listening to us, and we hope you found it useful. So it's goodbye from us and hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you. Goodbye.